Wow, this one's tricky. There are a lot of emotions running through me right now, but I think the main one is excitement to tackle a movie that is this complex and layered. I Saw the TV Glow is a 2024 psychological horror film directed by Jane Schoenbrun. Jane is non-binary and uses they/them pronouns, and this is important to the story because I Saw the TV Glow, while being a horror film, is also, spoiler alert, an allegory for being transgender and the transgender person's experience. That right there is, to me, what makes it so special and awesome and amazing. It's more than just a horror film. It doesn't even feel like horror at times because it teeters so close to reality that a lot of the horror slash fantasy elements just become more so symbolisms, and that's so creative and smart. It's such a great way of visualizing and expressing the transgender person's experience of perhaps living in fear or confusion or dissociation. The way those things are incorporated and merge into one with the horror aspects is done in such a complementary way that just elevates the storytelling so much. And I just love that from a narrative standpoint, from just a concept standpoint. This movie feels so personal. There are just a lot of details that are so specific that you feel like the director or the person who wrote the story had to have pulled it from their own personal experience. For example, the whole 1990s setting, the Pink O Pig, I think being a reference to shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which I believe was one of Jane's obsessions or shows that they grow up watching. I love those personal touches. It makes this movie feel strangely warm and homemade, if that makes sense, while being this sci-fi, fantastical, psychological horror film. And that's what makes this so juicy. It's like a 5-layered cake that you just can't help but appreciate. Conceptualization is one thing though, but actually executing this idea effectively to make it engaging is another thing. But no worries here because they also nailed the execution so well. The sound design in this movie is so good. So good. The Foley, the sound effects, the songs, the scores, all are masterful. There's this saying in the media industry that audio is much more important than visuals, and I 100% agree. And this movie takes such good advantage of sound to really immerse you and elevate the tone and themes of this story. Whether it's that little crackle sound that you just hear in the atmosphere, that mystical electrical orb that you can just hear spinning around the room, coming from somewhere but you don't know exactly where. The specific songs that they choose to put in the film, just the quality of the sound of the footsteps. Sound plays a major part in this film in making it alive. I kept thinking this thought while I was watching the movie, but something about the song choice and the cinematography and just how it's edited reminds me a lot of Sofia Coppola and her films. This almost feels like a Sofia Coppola movie. It reminds me of Lost in Translation, Somewhere, and most appropriately, The Virgin Suicides. If you've watched that movie, maybe you'll know what I'm talking about, but just the tone and the score of this movie and the way that there's this kind of fourth wall breaking with the character narrations throughout the film is very similar to I Saw the TV Glow's approach, and that is a great thing in this instance because I love Sofia Coppola and her films. I think Somewhere is underrated, I'll say it. But yeah, this movie has that going for it as well, that Sofia Coppola vibe. Absolutely adored the fourth wall breaks because it adds to the movie. That's another thing, another layer to this movie. It feels like this is like Owen's diary almost, that explains the purple scribbles and doodles and adds an extra layer to this movie where it becomes meta in a way, and it also feeds into its own themes of the characters being obsessed with a piece of media, that the media becomes more real than life itself, that dissociation from life. It's so good. It's so good. This movie takes advantage of the fact that it's a movie to engage us, the audience, directly with it. Most movies are just straight up narratives that don't acknowledge the audience in any way because they're just telling, a story. But there are movies like these, like I Saw the TV Glow, where they do break the fourth wall and acknowledge you, the viewer. And they do it so masterfully in this film, and it feels so appropriate when the movie itself is talking about how these characters are obsessed with media and how, you know, shows and movies saved them, but also kind of gave them that bitterness for life that they thought they were escaping. So it's like this never-ending loop. It's a love-hate relationship. So I love that added element into the film. It's so good. It makes everything much more layered and just connected. This film has the potential to be so meaningful to a lot of people, and I'm sure that it is, especially if they're trans or just have had identity crises or stuff in that same vein. I think it's cool that the two main leads in this movie are either part of the LGBTQ community or are an ally of it. I know for sure that Brigette Lundy-Paine is part of the LGBTQ community. I'm not so sure about Justice Smith. He definitely is an ally though, so it feels like the actors also have a personal stake in this story and a personal connection to the narrative. And not all films have that, and not all films need that, but for such a personal film like this, I think it's so beautiful that the two leads seem to connect with this themselves. That's great. That adds even another layer to this already. How many layers does this cake have? I don't know, but yeah, that's great too. I love that aspect, and just the whole trans allegory is done so well, and it's mixed in with the other theme slash topic of dissociating yourself through media. They combine those two things hand in hand, and it leads to a beautiful product where two subjects are being explored at the same time. It's mesmerizing. And on top of that, you also then have that sci-fi horror plot twist at the end, which feeds back into that trans allegory once again. It's just so good. I'm sorry if I keep repeating myself, but it's such a smart and effective way to communicate that feeling of separation and obsession and absolute dread all at once. It's so smart. I think Owen and Maddie are great characters. People can probably relate a lot to both of them, especially if they're questioning their identity as well. And I'm glad that characters like these exist so that people going through the similar things as them have figures to be comforted by. Absolutely wonderful. The colors in this film just pop. I love the way that this is shot. It seems like every scene has a distinct color palette or specific color that pops out at you. I remember like that purple rug, for example. Whenever that's in the frame, it just shines through everything else. And I think that's done very deliberately, and for them to have reached that point, there must have been a lot of brainstorming. So little details just like that are so good. And of course, all of this goes hand in hand with the color grading. There's definitely color grading done in this film, and I like the saturated, vibrant look of this movie. I think it complements it. Let's talk about the soundtrack though. I don't know how I can describe the genre of the songs that are in this film. Maybe like sad wanderlust or like melancholy. Oh, that's a great way to describe it. Melancholy. The opening song, I think it's called Anthem for a 17-Year-Old Girl or something like that. I love that. It's pretty melancholy. And then I also remember the Claw Machine song. I love that line in the song where it's like, but my heart is like a claw machine. Its only function is to reach. It can't hold on to anything. Love that line. Phoebe Bridgers is also in this film for like 1 or 2 shots. That's cool. Fred Durst is also, I think, playing Owen's dad, I believe. And I think there are more like other cameos and stuff like that, so that's pretty cool. I think Emma Stone is one of the producers for this film, and then Alex G also did something with the music for this film. There's just a lot of like hands on deck for this story, and you know, people believe in it. People want this story to be told, and I can absolutely see why it's brilliant on many accounts. You don't even have to be trans to get it, because you just get it. Although I will say I don't understand all of it, but I understand enough. And you know, with these psychological horror slash sci-fi slash fantasy films, there is always that element of keeping things open-ended to an extent, and just, you know, that open-endedness being a part of the package, sort of, and allowing the audience to theorize things and come up with conclusions for themselves. So there's always that aspect, and that's cool. And yeah, the ending was beautiful. I love that mantra that they have in the movie that says, was there is still time. I think that encapsulates what the ending is trying to say when, spoiler alert, Owen cuts open his chest and he's letting that TV static glow from inside him, which I think represents him finally embracing that inner Isabella in him, that inner other person. And I think it's even more interesting that he doesn't fully, go to the other side, back to Isabella. He opens his chest up a little bit, but then just puts back on his uniform. I think that symbolizes that maybe transitioning takes time, and that even after you know who you want to be, that it still takes some time to actually get there. And once again, that goes back to the mantra of there is still time. You can always try and work on yourself to quote unquote be the person that you want to be. There is still time. I love that so much. I could be reading it all wrong though, and maybe it has a other type of meaning, but I'm fine with being wrong. I like Owen's mother. I think she was a nice little side character that added to Owen's past and kind of trauma in a way. It's more so Owen's paternal figures, but Owen losing his mother like that because of cancer at a relatively young age probably hurt him a lot and made him even more alone. So yeah, I liked Owen's mom. I think she was a great addition to the film as well. In terms of horror, I think there were two shots that got me. First one was the melting ice cream man, and the second one was that shot of Maddie just standing creepily in the center of the supermarket aisle. I think those were the two times that I got by the movie. Other than that, I wouldn't really say this is a horror film, and I believe Jane said in an interview that this isn't really supposed to be a horror film, but more so a film for people who love horror. And I think that's a great way of describing this film. Not necessarily a horror. It's more like emotional, psychological, existential horror. The best type of horror. There's probably so much more that I can talk about, and these are the kind of films that I think deserve video essays that you can just unpack a scene for a scene and just try and figure out the deeper meaning behind everything. Maybe I'll do that in the future, but on a surface level, this is what I thought of the movie. I think it's pretty darn amazing. I'm looking forward to see what else Jane makes in the future. And yeah, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being here. Have a wonderful day, and remember, there is still time.